I'm sure we've all heard of attachment styles and disorders when it comes to children, but can adults have attachment disorders too? And if so, what does that look like? Stay tuned because that's what we're going to be discussing in today's video. If you haven't subscribed to the channel or you're new to the channel, make sure and do that now before we get started. Just click the little red subscribe button and the bell beside it to be notified every time that we release a new video. So attachment disorders, do adults have them too? The short answer is yes, and here's why. When a child develops an attachment disorder in the first few years of life, a lot of the symptoms carry into adulthood with him, because attachment disorder basically means that you weren't properly nurtured by your caregivers in the first 3 years of life. So you formed beliefs in that stage, things like whether people would be there for you or not, whether you could trust people, whether they were going to do you harm, etc. Attachment styles are usually described as either insecure or secure, and there are a few subcategories of insecure attachment: ambivalent attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and disorganized attachment. So how do you know whether you have insecure attachment or secure attachment? Well, each attachment style has its own set of characteristics, and some of them overlap, but in general, they definitely are distinct from each other. Studies done have shown that about 45% of people have secure attachment, and about 55% of people have insecure attachment. If you have secure attachment, also known as autonomous attachment, it will be marked by high self-esteem, the ability to enjoy intimate relationships, the ability to reach out to others for support, and also the ability to share feelings with other people. In romantic relationships, a secure adult is able to lend support to their partner when they feel distressed, and also feel comfortable going to their partner when they themselves feel troubled. The relationships tend to be honest, open, and equal, with both people feeling independent of each other but still loving toward one another. There's a real, a genuine connection there, as opposed to this routine, emotionally cut off connection. Secure attachment is able to develop when parents are emotionally available and attuned and co-regulating and validating and attentive to their child's needs during the first 3 to 7 years of life. Now, the first two insecure attachment styles are often grouped together, but they have notable distinctions, so I'm going to present them separately. Adults with ambivalent attachment, also known as dismissive avoidant, often see themselves as very independent and kind of go it alone, and they have real strict boundaries and can be very emotionally unavailable to their partners, and they often struggle to make or maintain close relationships or friendships. In essence, they lack the desire to form and maintain close social bonds and just don't see the need for them. These people would say, for example, that they're comfortable not having close emotional relationships and depending on other people. Because of their childhood experiences, they have learned to be invulnerable to feelings associated with being closely attached to others. So basically, they're self-sufficient. And this kind of attachment was formed by a parent who was aloof and rejecting and emotionally removed or misattuned to the child's emotional needs, even if they may have met the child's basic needs like food and shelter. Ambivalent attachment is more common in men than in women and is often associated with sociopathy and antisocial personality disorder. Adults with avoidant attachment, also known as anxious avoidant, are afraid of intimacy and relationships and tend to distrust and lash out at anyone who gets too close to them. They have severe difficulty regulating their emotions in relationships, responding poorly or inappropriately to negative emotions. They have a deeply rooted negative view of themselves and view other people and their support in a negative light as well. They tend to have less commitment and satisfaction in their romantic relationships, and also a higher likelihood toward emotional or physical violence in those relationships. It's typical for adults with avoidant attachment to have had a high number of sexual partners, low impulse control, high anxiety or hypervigilance, and again, an overall fear of intimacy and relationships. So slightly similar to ambivalent attachment, but the distinction is that a lot of times these people still tend to be in relationships and seem to have a need for them. Avoidant attachment is caused when a child was frequently dismissed or ignored, and so that child learned to be self-reliant and to dismiss his own feelings and needs. And often in the first 8 months of life, there wasn't enough maternal nurture, so enough soothing and gentle care by the mother or female caregiver. This attachment style is most often associated with narcissistic personality disorder. So people with anxious attachment, also known as anxious preoccupied attachment, most commonly worry constantly that their partner is going to abandon them, and they often have an unhealthy emotional hunger, making them crave this constant closeness and intimacy with their partner. They tend to be overly dependent in relationships and need this frequent reassurance that people care about them. They tend to be prone to jealousy or other insecurities in the relationships, and low self-worth is pretty common amongst this type, and also always being afraid that their partner is going to abandon them, which I think I already mentioned. So this makes them overly sensitive to a partner's moods or actions, and also makes them be overly emotional or moody themselves. They will also frequently look for their partner to rescue them or complete them. So they interpret independent actions taken by their partner as proof or evidence that their partner is indeed going to abandon him or her. Anxious attachment is most often associated with codependency, which some experts consider to be a personality disorder because it has just as many traits that are growth inhibiting or dysfunctional as the other personality disorders. Anxious attachment is caused by parents who are slow or inconsistent when responding to a child's cries of distress, whether that be because they don't want to spoil a child or because they're too busy with their other things, maybe they have other kids. But when the child is not responded to immediately, especially when they're a baby, it's so important when your baby is little to respond immediately when they cry, because they are literally powerless and completely dependent at that stage. So when a parent doesn't do this or does it inconsistently, it can lead to anxious attachment. Researchers have found that a history of emotional neglect, which is also known as antipathy, in childhood is associated with anxiety disorders later in life, such as social phobia, generalized anxiety disorder, panic attacks, and depression. So you may have guessed this, but anxious attachment is more common in women than in men. The most extreme form of insecure attachment is called disorganized attachment, and adults with disorganized attachment have an extreme need for closeness and a fear of rejection, but very confusing mental states and behaviors. So there are some traits that kind of cross over with anxious attachment, but there are also some very clear distinctions as well. Because this type is often confused with how they view their environments and relationships, so they can be very erratic in their behavior and have outbursts. They often act out in ways that don't make sense to others, and a lot of times they can't even make sense of their own experiences, so they tend to lack remorse or empathy for others. They can be selfish, controlling, and refusing to take personal responsibility for their actions, disregarding rules. They frequently experience anxiety and confusion, self-hatred, and doubt. Adults with disorganized attachment often feel intense loneliness, and this is because they have a deep desire for connection, but the fear response linked to that desire is so erratic that it often drives away potential connection. They suffer from a negative self-image and extremely damaging self-talk. Disorganized attachment is most closely associated with borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder. Disorganized attachment is caused by parenting that is inconsistent. So sometimes the parent may be attuned and kind and warm, and other times that same parent is cold and misattuned and critical or uncaring. A child who develops disorganized attachment was often born into emotional chaos. So the mother may have had a psychiatric condition or been an alcoholic or been married to an alcoholic. And so physical abuse is often associated with this attachment style. The mother might be lovey-dovey one minute and then smacking the child the next. Or the mother could be under tremendous stressors herself and have very limited resources, or like be low income or even on the poverty level. The mother was often poorly parented herself, which brings up the term transgenerational trauma. So often attachment styles get passed from one generation to the next, which makes sense, but it's a really sad reality, and so much better when a parent can learn, get the healing they need, and break the cycle so that their child has a chance to be securely attached. So those are the attachment styles. As I said earlier, some experts group ambivalent and avoidant into the same attachment style, but I see them as very different, both in cause and traits. Thankfully, your wiring can be changed. A lot has been written about neural plasticity, the fact that the neural networks developed in early childhood as a result of deficits can, with work and intention, be rewired. Trauma can be healed at any point in our lives. We can learn to trust again, and we can learn to feel safe. I talk more about this in some of my other videos, but basically, if you have an insecure attachment, it's not part of your authentic nature, because every baby is born with the ability to securely attach. But when we're a child in an environment that isn't safe or isn't nurturing, we form maladaptations just to survive and get through. So it's necessary to deconstruct these in order to restore authentic nature. Hopefully you found the information we discussed today useful, and if you did, please consider giving the video a like to help others find it. And also feel free to ask questions in the comments if I didn't explain something fully or I left something hanging. I'd also love to connect with you on social media, so feel free to visit my Facebook page, Leah Theobald. I'll put a link in the description so it's easy to find. Next week, we're going to be talking about the protective self and how it prevents you from getting to the root of these insecure attachment styles and their many maladaptations. So make sure that you're subscribed and that your notifications are turned on so you don't miss it. Thanks for joining me today. See you in the next video. Bye.